Hey guys, it's Kate Journey, and I am back today with a slightly new setup. I have a microphone now, so hopefully the audio is better. But if it's not, I'm very sorry. I finally pulled it out and started playing with it. It is compatible with my phone and with my software, so I'm very happy about that. I had planned on using it with my iPad. Anyway, wild tangent, weird tangent. So today I wanted to jump into trying something that we haven't done on my channel before, but it's still in kind of the same vein of the things that I've been exploring here with you guys. So today I wanted to take one of our more common supernatural, like people type creatures, and discuss different ways of writing them. So I'm thinking we're going to start with werewolves. That's written terribly. Good Lord, I need to angle that better. Okay. Werewolves. I hope you can read that. Okay, so anyway. So there's lots of different traits about werewolves that are kind of baked in. So the idea that they are cursed. The idea that they can't control or struggle with controlling transformation. And the idea with the transformation is that the transforming implies violence. I played chicken and lost. Violence. So this idea of transforming, the transformation implies violence. So like if you've got a creature, like let's say this werewolf character that you're creating has absolute control. I have a werewolf character in my books. His name is Lev. I love him completely. He's amazing, and he has absolute and complete control over whether or not he shifts back and forth from a werewolf to a human. I wanted to kind of give him that because he's not the tortured soul in the book. Other people are. But the transformation always implies, in books, movies, everything, it implies violence. It implies that they're stepping away from their civilized, humane personality and jumping into a more animalistic viewpoint. Now, you could turn this on its head. I don't know exactly how you would pull that off, but you could turn it on its head. For me, my character, my werewolf character, my main werewolf character, he transforms when he knows he needs to fight and when he knows he needs to hide. And it's about survival for him. Now, if someone was cursed, see, he was born a vampire. So this idea that somebody's bitten and cursed and it's, it turns them into this violent, terrifying creature, which is, historically accurate for the myth. The transformation implies a complete lack of control. So there's the connection there. So this transformation, if you're cursed and it's not voluntary, implies a lack of control, which also implies no control of violence. So if they can't control their curse, they can't have no control over their violence, right? So if you're writing this character and you want to create a character that has control over these things, then you don't want to make them cursed unless you make them ancient. Now, here's another one. So modern day werewolves have often been implied to be immortal. Now, whether or not that is historically accurate, I actually don't know. I haven't researched it. For me, I like my characters immortal. I love the idea of kind of playing with this, like, okay, I've got this 300-year-old character that is taking it for granted that they would live through most things, and now I've thrown them into a situation where they could potentially die, and like the weight of that. I really like playing with that because I think as humans, we tend to think that we're infallible and that, these bad things happen to other people, and so we don't really prepare for it as much as we should. Or if you have anxiety like me, you over prepare and you hurt your own feelings with scenarios that have never happened and will never happen. But let's not get into that. I mean, you could give your werewolf anxiety. Actually, my werewolf has some social anxiety. So if you want a werewolf with anxiety, you go for it. I think it's actually really fun, especially if it's something that they like. Let's say, okay, let's pretend here. Let's give them anxiety. Let's get into actual character development here. Now, if they can control, let's go 1 and 2. So if they've got 2 and they can control it, how does their anxiety affect their shift? And when they shift. And how, like, let's say they shift in panic attacks, how much control of violence in shift. So this would be a fun thing to play with. So my character has complete control. He's older. He's 300 years old. He's got control. Actually, he's a little older than 300 years old. He's like 350 years old. But he has control over his shifts, and he has control over his anxiety. He's had lots of practice. But if he were a 15-year-old kid who was dealing with the same problems, if this was a coming-of-age thing, or even, hey, a traumatized 50-year-old who's dealing with past issues and it's come up, and maybe he's been tossed in prison, maybe he's tossed in a human prison, and he's stuck in this situation where he can't shift, but he needs to shift because he's having anxiety. That could be really fun to play with. Especially like the dichotomy of like the human world and what they are, and trying to survive and hide, because let's face it, if there was a real werewolf hanging out, they're not the top of the food chain, unfortunately. We like to think that they would be, that they could be violent and a predator, but for the most part, they would be stuck having to hide from humans in order to survive. I don't know if that's a predator so much as someone in the middle of the food chain, because let's face it, we humans were at the top. And that's good or bad, depending on your position. I think it's good in certain circumstances. Anyway, weird side quest there. Okay, so now if they're immortal, age gives some calm and control. Because as we get older, we tend to discover our own strengths and kind of settle into ourselves as people, and we become less afraid of situations. So age implies calm and control, whereas youth implies bold and discovery. So if I were writing like a teenager who was bitten and cursed, and they have no idea what's going on, there would be a period of extreme terror, but there would also be a period of boldness and discovery and enjoying the changes and being like, wow, I can smell better and I can hear better, and I'm stronger when I'm in this, in this body. But they're also now, hunting their friends and having to deal with that. So if this were a coming of age story, that would be what I would play with. Whereas if I'm writing an older werewolf, I would want them to have more of a sense of when to use it as a tool and when to avoid it at all costs. So I think that could be played with, but only if they have control. If they're cursed, then if they were older, if they were like 300-year-old werewolf that was cursed, they would know how to hide themselves. They would know how to, lock themselves away. They would know how to avoid violence, because that's the only way they're going to survive. Whereas if they're cursed and they're young, they're very likely going to get caught. They're also, if they're cursed and they're young, very likely they've got an older mentor or the person that cursed them that could help them. But there's lots of different elements of control in there and lots of other things. So there's a lot here that you can play with, just with the stereotypical werewolves. Now, when you take the werewolf and you turn it into another idea of like other shifters, and we move away from this cursed idea and more into the control, then we move into shifters. So I love shifters. My werewolf is a shifter. He's got complete control, and he turns into a big, blocky, kind of like a mix between a wolf and a pit bull, only bigger. That's what he looks like when he's a werewolf. But I would love to play with a shifter that's not just a werewolf. Maybe we've got, fox, like kitsunes and things like that. Cats, like big cat, small cat, different cat. You could even go with like shifters that turn into something that's not a predator. Like, let's say we've got a shifter who likes to turn into, you know, I don't know. What kind of prey animal would you be willing to shift into? Maybe like a bunny. That would take a unique personality. Um, Maybe somebody who could shift into like insects, or snakes. So once we get away from this idea that it has to be a wolf, and we move into shifter, which is, I think, a more modern play on it. There are shifters in mythology that I've found. I like to study mythology. I find it fascinating, and I love to use it in my writing. But I also like to take like this kernel from mythology and turn it in different directions and add different things to it. So my books are not completely historically accurate. So if you go into them, don't expect that, because you won't find it. Because I like to play with it too much. But if you take the wolf out of the werewolves and you turn it into other things and you try these different things out, maybe you get, maybe you have a character who can turn into multiple different things. I forget what that's called. There's another name for that. But, you know, you've got somebody who can shift into a fox and a cat, or a fox and a bunny, you know, depending. And how would they use that? What if you had a character who was like an antagonist who could shift into a bunny to get into places, and then would shift into a fox to hunt in those places? That could be really fun to play with. This kind of idea of the back and forth and being able to change from prey to predator, which again is also the part of the werewolf thing. So if you go into like the old ideas of it, when you were the wolf, you were the predator, and when you were the human, you were kind of part of the prey. And it is very much this dichotomy of bouncing back and forth of predator and prey. Having a werewolf as a love interest can be one of those things that people can do a lot of different interesting things with. For me, my werewolf does not shift during the sex act. And there are some, not when he's mating with a human, because I personally have no no inclinations in that direction. But you know, you could. There's nothing against it. You could have them shift. You could have them do different things. In fact, I've read a book where the female was the werewolf, and she was shifting slightly during sex to make it better. So that is something that you can play with. I think that was called Blood and Chocolate. If I find it on Amazon, I'll link it down below. That was a really good coming of age story from a werewolf's perspective. I liked it. I didn't like the movie. They made a movie based on the book, and they changed it so completely that none of the characters were actually who they were, and it made me kind of sad. Yeah. And they made they made the actual good guy in the book into the bad guy in the movie. It was very weird. It was a very weird adaptation. There we go. Anyway, so yeah, there's just a quick short video of how like you can take different things and move it around. Let me see. Hang on. Okay, so let's settle in and create like a character here. Have to move my seat back. Okay, so let's take some ideas from like this. So let's say we've got a shifter protagonist. And let's go with, let's say we're doing a coming of age story. And I'm saying that because I usually write adults. I don't write coming of age. I don't write YA. I write adult fiction. But let's say we're working in like a coming of age YA kind of situation. And let's say our character is, you know, the shifting during puberty is something that's been done a lot, and it's been done a lot for a very good reason. The idea of, you know, you're changing into adult, changing you into something else is very, very common. And if it's well done, you know, it can be a great exploration of the process of becoming an adult and the process of leaving childhood behind. So let's say he already knows it's not a curse. He's got a family of wolves. So he's grown up around this, he's seen it, and he knows that this transformation is coming. Let's say starts with puberty. The W/ is my shorthand for with, so if you see that, I'm sorry. It's like happens automatically. Even when I'm journaling to myself, I'll do with it. It's very funny. Okay, so let's say this starts with puberty. So if we're doing this, he's gonna have high school problems. Gender problems likely. And what I mean by gender problems is it doesn't have to necessarily mean that the character is gender fluid or is trans or is dealing with any of that stuff. It could be as simple as recognizing that these lessons that you're a boy and you do boy things, kind of breaking away from that, or you're a girl and you do girl things, breaking away from that, kind of breaking some of the normal things that we can kind of pigeonhole people into. I know that puberty is a time where people kind of explore this a lot, and that's a good thing. They will also have sexuality problems. So even if they are cisgendered and heterosexual, they are going to run into problems with their sexuality. They're going to find themselves, aroused at the wrong time, both male and female. They're going to find themselves crushing on someone that's inappropriate. They're going to have all of these problems. Now, what I would do is how would shifting make all of these things worse? And how would shifting eventually making things worse, how would it eventually lead to self-discovery and overcoming self-doubt? That's what I would ask myself. If I were building this character and I were trying to set them in a contemporary setting, in a coming-of-age YA, these would be the kind of questions that I would be asking myself. And because I've decided that they are a family of wolves, maybe they'll transform into a wolf. Maybe I've seen it done in like kids movies and things like that, where the family is of wolves and then they transform into something else. That's been done really well. I know in oh gosh, what's that show? It's a werewolf show, coming of age teenager werewolf show. Oh my gosh, I can't think of the name of it. Anyway, I know in that one, there's a kid who gets transformed into a werewolf, but they turn into something else because of their own mental health. Oh, and that's another thing, mental health. Mental health problems. I don't know about you, but I don't know of a single high school age kid who is not having some sort of mental health problems at certain points in time during it, just because, at bare minimum, because of, a fluctuation in hormones messing with, how their brain works. And that has, that's not counting bullies, that's not counting classes, that's not counting, finding out you're in love with your best friend, that's not counting, all of these other things that are issues that come up during your high school years. And then you're adding on top of it werewolf, which is one of the reasons why I don't write YA. This stuff is kind of sometimes interesting for me to read. I would have a really hard time writing this just because I want to deal with more, how should I put that? I want to deal with more concrete adult stuff. I want them to have one problem, not 30. Does that make sense? I want my character to be like, okay, I have an anger problem. I'm going to, through this story, deal with this one anger problem. And at the end of the story, we've realized by then that I also have anxiety. And so now in the next story, I'm dealing with anxiety. All 30 problems all at once is really overwhelming. I don't want to do it. So kudos to people who can write YA. Like it's so overwhelming for me. My high school years were just absolute crap. Like They say it was, a lot of people, those were the highlight of their lives or whatever. But I wouldn't go back to being in high school for all the money in the world. I would not go back. That was miserable. Anyway, so here's like a weird random exploration of like creating characters with werewolves. You can take little chunks of different ideas and break them down. So let's, we could riff off of this some more, or we could riff off of this some more, or we could riff off of this some more. And before you start creating characters and making decisions about them, just play with this. Play with the idea. Play with something else. Think about it. Think about it while you're falling asleep, and then sometimes, usually when I'm sleeping, I'll come up with something better. I think I'm going to be doing this for different, mind maps and things like that for different characters. Let me know if you guys like this, if there's any sort of, different characters and creatures and kind of things that you guys want to talk about. But that is it from me today. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe, and I will be back probably in a couple of days.